So, Baruch Hashem, we're continuing on with the last portion of Pirkei Avot, the last chapter of Perek Shishi. I think we have, besides tonight, about 2 more weeks to go. We'll be done with the series of Pirkei Avot. We left off with the Mishnah that deals with how to acquire the crown of Torah. There's the crown of Malchut, of royalty, there's the crown of priesthood. They all have certain benefits, certain advantages, certain requirements in order to be a Kohen, in order to be a Melech, to be a king. Nonetheless, the Keter of Torah, which really belongs to all of Am Yisrael, not to a particular tribe, is greater than those two. We did say, of course, there's an additional 4th Keter called the Keter Shem Tov, of a good name, a good reputation, She'oleh al Gabehem, that really sits on top of all of them. It's above everything else. Acquiring a good name in life is an important achievement, something that we should all aspire to acquire. But here we're dealing with the three major ones, and that Keter Torah is definitely the most important one. And in order to impress upon us the value of Torah, the Mishnah, the rabbis go through the various steps that are needed to acquire Torah. Torah is not just raw knowledge. Torah is intended ultimately to mold us, to mold the Jew, to mold his personality, to discipline him, to give him the proper outlook. But even with all that, there could always be an ulterior motive when one learns Torah. That's called Shelo Lishma. The ultimate learning of Torah should be for the sake of Shamayim, for the sake of heaven. It is a mitzvah. Hashem asked of us to learn the Torah. It is for our good, for our benefit, not for any gain, any personal gain. But in order to be able to learn Torah Lishma, one has to already be on a high level. You just don't begin to learn Torah Lishma. You just don't begin to do anything in life unless you, of course, somehow get some training, some experience, and you build yourself up. Torah, other than just plain experience, requires preparation. And that is the preparation of the individual in his midot, in his character. If one's character is not refined, if his outlook is not correct, if his motivation is not right, not for the real reasons, then it will be lacking. It will not be the same. It will not be the same Torah. Nonetheless, the rabbis tell us, "Le'olam yilmad adam Torah shelo lishma, shemitoch shelo lishma yavo lishma." One should always learn Torah, even shelo lishma, not for the real sake, not for the real reasons, even if he's just curious, even if he's just trying it out, even though all he's trying to accomplish is to be knowledgeable in Torah, but not necessarily for its real sake. Let him do it. Let's just get him started. Because eventually the Torah will guide him. It will elevate him, and hopefully, B'ezrat Hashem, he will merit to learn Torah Lishma, for its real sake. So what we see from all of this is that it's interesting that with the crown of the Torah, we're not only dealing with requirements or conditions in order to acquire it, it actually brings about, the Torah actually gives us certain lofty levels as a result of learning it. So it's not only levels that are required in order to acquire the Torah, in order to achieve a high level of understanding and connection with the Torah, but also by learning the Torah will bestow upon us tremendous benefits, tremendous benefits, as we will see, that people who have not learned this Mishnah have no idea, no clue. And even if they learn this Mishnah, they have still no clue until you actually go through the learning of Torah and see that this is not just an ordinary course in some science. This is Torah, Mishamayim. This is the ultimate knowledge of God. And in order to properly acquire it, not just to know it, to acquire it, to make it a part of us, it means that the individual has to be ready for it. As opposed to a professor in college, he may be the top professor. We explained in the past, all his does and all his job really involves is giving over the material. He could be a drunk at home. He could be abusive of his wife. He could be a nasty person. He could still be a good professor. There's no contradiction. With Torah, it's impossible. In order to give over Torah, in order to acquire the crown of Torah, the individual has to be worthy of it. Otherwise, it's not compatible. So we began with the various levels, steps, conditions that lead to the acquisition of Torah. And I believe we left off belev tov, with a good heart. Good heart meaning that a person is not jealous if others know it better than him. There's no room for competition in Torah. We're focused clearly on acquiring the best we can based on our own abilities. And the fact is that every Jew has a share in the Torah. It could be that some people's share is a little bit larger than the rest of them. Their mission in life is different. Nonetheless, there's no room to feel bad. If you try your best and that's all you could do, because ultimately that's all they're going to demand of us, is to do our best. So we left off with those words, belev tov. Very important idea is that one develop that, aspire to that. Obviously, you're not just born like that. You need to develop it. And in this way, one can share his knowledge with others. I know people who are so possessive of what they have and what they worked on, they don't want to share it. What are they afraid of? That somebody's going to copy them. That's not a belev tov. Valuing the Torah properly means this is so beautiful and so valuable, let me share it with everyone for free. That's a belev tov. That's where we left off. The next important condition is be'emunat chachamim. Something that's very misunderstood. Unfortunately, throughout our history, we've had groups that have failed to understand the importance of emunat chachamim. Emunat chachamim means to have the proper faith and trust in the chachamim. The chachamim are not just knowledgeable people, wise people. Chachamim are the teachers who have been entrusted by the Torah, but nobody else by the Torah. The Torah says itself, al pi asher yerucha. They have been entrusted with the transmission and the teaching of the Torah. And when we talk about transmission, what do we mean? We don't mean just the 5 books of Moses. We don't just mean Chamisha Chomshei Torah. We mean Torah Sheba'al Peh, which is a lot more voluminous. There's a lot more detail than in Torah Shebechtav. Torah Sheba'al Peh. Look at all the Gemarot. Look at all the Mishnayot. Look at the Zohar, the Midrashim. There's a lot more in the oral Torah than there is in the written Torah, because the oral contains all the details. The Torah Shebechtav, the written, is only abridged. And in order to properly understand the Torah Shebechtav, we need Torah Sheba'al Peh. So we need Chachamim to teach it to us. So by believing in them, by listening to them, by following what they say, it makes it easier for us to connect with the Torah, with the real Torah. In the same way that this Torah, the written Torah, was given to us in Sinai, we believe that what they have taught us was also given in Sinai. Therefore, one who makes fun of them, looks down on them, is disrespectful of Chachamim, is obviously at some point in time going to be disrespectful of the Torah too, disrespectful of the tradition. It's either the whole thing or nothing. You can't just pick and choose. I like this mitzvah, I like this chacham, I don't like the rest of them. It doesn't make sense. Obviously we have preferences when it comes to people, individuals. That's something else. But to minimize a Talmid Chacham, who's a true Talmid Chacham and accept a Talmid Chacham, means that we're minimizing the Torah. At some point we're minimizing the transmission, the chain, the link of transmission from Sinai. And throughout history, those groups that I'm talking about, those individuals, are the Sadducees, the Tzdukim, the Baitusim, the Karaites, the Reform, the Reconstructionists, and even the Conservative to an extent. I say to an extent because in conservatives, Some of them are coming back, some of them are stronger, some of them are not as strong. They at least acknowledge that Torah is min hashamayim. They have a little bit of an issue with making changes or adapting it to our times, which is wrong. But at least the ones who admit that Torah is min hashamayim, they have a chance to one of these days embrace it and come back. Whereas reform is sad. It's very sad. You basically have a situation where the individual, I don't know if all of them, but the ones that I'm familiar with, are saying, this was a committee, this is not a divine word, this is not set in stone, this is just a tradition, it's not a way of life necessarily, it's just part of the Jews' civilization and culture. And those kinds of statements minimizes the importance of Torah. It takes it down to the level of, this is just like hieroglyphics of the Egyptians. We figure it out and we'll beautify it, we'll make it better, we'll make some changes, make it more legible, make it adaptable, not make it so hard, right? So that's where it all begins. It begins with a lack of emunat chachamim, not with a lack of emunah in the Torah. It begins with emunah because chachamim were human beings, and it was easy to look down at human beings for political reasons. I don't like the guy's face. I'm sure he's in for the money. That's why he's running for Kohen Gadol. All kinds of silly things that people, every generation in every country and community, I'm sure you know such individuals who like to poke fun, are disrespectful, find some fault, and magnify the fault of the person. Come on, what's the hadush? Everybody who is a human being has faults, and we all have weaknesses. But be careful. If he's a Talmid Chacham, if he's entrusted with the transmission of Torah, and you do that, not only does the Torah lose respect in your eyes, your kids, what are they going to hear from that? That Abba didn't care about these things. Obviously he doesn't value them. What are they going to do? So therefore, it is sad that many groups in the history of Am Yisrael did not get the point that in order for the transmission to survive intact, this is an important condition, emunat chachamim. The reason why it's called emunat chachamim and not kavod chachamim or something else is because we're talking about the concept of emunah. Emunah is sometimes blind faith. I say sometimes because, as the Rambam points out, when it comes to believing in Hashem, it should not be blind faith. We actually do not believe, we know for a fact. So we make that distinction that with the belief in God, it's not just blind. We know for a fact, it's a yediyah. It's just a fact. Look around. The world is designed. It makes sense. I don't just believe it because I've been told that. I'm told to actually know it. And if I analyze creation, I can come to know it as a fact, not as blind faith. But at times we do use emunah as blind faith, plain faith, because we don't know for certain, we have no proof. Tchiyat HaMetim is an example. Do we know for sure how it will be, when it will be, whether it will be? We have emunah that there will come a time, and by the way, that time is coming very, very soon, that the dead will rise. Wow, that's so unusual. We don't see that every day. Yeah, it requires emunah. And where does that emunah come from? From the fact that Hashem proved himself in so many other ways that now I also trust everything else he says. So yes, I'm trusting, even though I may not have facts to prove it, to back it up, okay? So sometimes it is a blind faith that we're supposed to have. Even though, yes, we should know the Torah, we should understand it as best as possible, but there's no way in the world we can understand everything. There will be times that we don't know for sure what the source of this halakha is. We may not fully understand a certain passage. We may not have all the explanations we would like to have that will enable us to comprehend what the message is. So what we have is emunah. Okay, it's a little hard to understand, perhaps difficult to accept. Nonetheless, I accept it. Why? Because I have emunah that this is true. And that is the fortitude of our forefathers, where they were able to give their life for what they believed in because they believed in it blindly. So if you don't have a blind faith as well as knowledge, basic knowledge, then one may have a difficult time during challenges to his faith, whether it was during the Inquisition and other times, or if he's full of doubts. He's a thinker, and thinkers are sometimes in trouble. It's good to think, it's good to be a thinker, but you can get yourself in trouble if you don't have proper emunah, because now what? I have these doubts, and I don't have anybody to ask these very complex questions to. Yeah, you won't find easily around the corner a rabbi, a knowledgeable person that can answer every single question. First of all, there's no such thing as every single question, but even if there were, they don't live around where we live. They don't. I mean, you just can't pick up a phone. You can't certainly know. You have a big question to ask. Who are you going to ask? So sfekot have arisen throughout our history. Sfekot, doubts, and if they were not answered, or if they were not dealt with properly, you had groups or individuals who eventually became apikorsim, heretics, who said, no, this cannot be true. You have people today who originally were born Jewish, who call themselves Messianic Jews, or call themselves all other kinds of names, witnesses, and I don't want to even repeat the various cults that exist. And how do they come about? Some of them come about through a lack of self-esteem and pride in their origin. Yeah, they just don't understand how special and unique it is to be a part of the Jewish faith, to practice Judaism, what it really means, and as a result of that, they look to satisfy themselves with other cults, practices, and religions who promise love and brotherliness, and each one will take care of each other. All kinds of shtuyot, things that some people buy because that's what they need. They're hungry for love and affection. But then you have the smart ones. You have really the intellectual ones who say, well, this makes sense. It's logical to an extent. Millions of people have embraced it. Have you first done your homework? Are you familiar with your own Torah before you come and choose something else? Oh no, I've never studied Torah. Then how could you make a fair comparison? How could you give a fair evaluation if you're not familiar with your own Torah? So we have apikorsim, heretics, who came about as a result of all kinds of factors, including those who are upset, including those who are unhappy, those who are just ready to give up. And in order to justify, of course, what they're doing, they don't say, I'm upset. This is not true. They're making it up, those rabbis. Yes, they want the money. All kinds of excuses, and these are only excuses to cover up the real reasons of why they chose to be an unbeliever, a heretic. So because of the potential, there's always this potential of children or adults having doubts, lingering, it's important to have a clear emunah in the Chachamim. Even if we don't understand something, even though it's a very difficult subject, and especially in our generation when science unfortunately has the upper hand. And I say the upper hand when I compare it to religion. Science is obviously to be admired for all the discoveries it has made. But when I say the upper hand, I say unfortunately it has taken, in some people's life, it has more kavod, it's more respected than religion. People are making up all kinds of theories today about religion. Oh, there's no such a thing as creation, it's a big bang, you come from a monkey, and so forth, evolution. And science can be proven, of course. Yeah. All right. So that's the times we're living in. That science is on a pedestal, in religion not so much. So during these times, emunah temimah, clean, pure faith is so important, because you may easily encounter a scientific explanation for something that goes contrary to what we've learned all along about the age of the universe, about anything. That you say, oh, this can't be only 5,773 years. The world is much older than that. Look at all those bones that have been found from dinosaurs. Right. And most people are not knowledgeable enough to counter those arguments and say, well, how do you know those bones are millions of years old? You have proof, scientific proof? And the answer is no. There's no true scientific proof. Anybody tells you that there's true scientific proof that dinosaur bones are millions of years old is lying. There is none. It's all theories, based on theories, assumptions. There's no method, scientific method, that can demonstrate unequivocally that a dinosaur lived millions of years old. On the contrary, I can prove it that it was only a few thousand years old. Through common sense, not through scientific methods, just common sense. Yeah, but that's a different subject. But once they have an agenda to deny the Torah, their agenda is that the world came about by itself, and you need therefore billions of years for that to happen, then you, of course, in order to be able to go and to continue along that same line, you can't contradict yourself. So you have to stick to the same line. Emunah temimah teaches that I may not know really what happened to the dinosaurs, how they disappeared. It's a difficult question. But who says I need to? Who says I need to know this? They existed fine. There were many animals that became extinct over time, and they are, some of them are dinosaurs. Do I need to know how old they are? No. Yeah, but it's going to upset your belief. No, nothing is going to upset my belief. My belief is stronger than anything else. That's called emunah temimah. So that emunah is required at times, especially with the transmission of the Masoret called emunat chachamim over here. The next point is the Kabbalat HaYisurim. Kabbalat HaYisurim means the acceptance of suffering. Suffering sounds like a bad word, but it's not. The rabbis tell us, Shlosha dvarim nitnu b'yisurim. Hashem gave us 3 things that require of us tremendous amount of pain and hard work to acquire. He gave it to us, but he didn't just give it to us. It requires tremendous amount of work, and sometimes painful work, to acquire them. What are they? Torah, Eretz Yisrael, and Olam Haba. In order to acquire Torah, you really have to work hard. Sleepless nights, complete dedication and immersion, and sometimes that may be not comfortable. Eretz Yisrael, well, you all know how hard it is to acquire Eretz Yisrael. It's not easy. We've had our share of enemies. The land is, of course, a sweet land, Zabat Chalav Udvash. It's blessed, but at times, unfortunately, when the inhabitants don't behave themselves, then the land does not behave itself, and it makes it more difficult. Olam Haba, you want to have a share to the world to come to, you have to work hard for it, right? You have to earn it. Anything that is given to us b'yisurim means you have to work hard for it. Why should I work hard for it? Because Hashem wants us to appreciate the value of it. Hashem could have given us the land of Israel on a silver platter. He made us conquer it. Think about it. We left Egypt, go through the desert, now we have to fight wars. I want this on a silver platter. Why do I have to work so hard? Why do I have to conquer, drive out people? Hashem says, I want you to appreciate it. I want you to fight hard for it. If you don't fight hard for something, you're not going to stick with it. You're going to give it up at some point. Look how many people today are willing to give it up. It's nothing. so much blood spilled for it. This is our heritage. This is where our forefathers lived. This is the promised land. What about all that? Oh, no, that's a fairy tale. I don't know what they're thinking. I have to ask, actually, one of these days, what they're thinking about those words. Is that really, you think that's a fairy tale? Then you have, of course, the pragmatists. Yes, you're right, it's true, but what can we do? We have no choice. The world is against us. Right? Still, it's the same attitude of non-commitment. If you're committed to something, you realize it may take a lot of work, but in the end it's worth it. This is Eretz Israel, this is Torah, this is Olam Haba. It's worth it. I'm willing to work hard. Anything that is worth it, aren't we willing to work hard on? Take a diamond dealer. I know, personally, diamond dealers who, if they know they're going to make a big profit on this coming trip that they're going to be taking to Guangzhou, China or somewhere, and one of the conditions of the trip will be to sleep on the floor. That's it. All the hotels are taken. You think he's not going to go because the hotels are taken? He's promised and guaranteed a big profit. What's a big profit? Let's say $500,000. Is that a good amount of money? Could you live off of that for the year? $500,000.
It's worth it to say.
Is it worth it to sleep on the floor? Yeah. You will be willing to sleep even a whole week on the floor. $500,000? The rest of the
Even not to sleep.
Even not to sleep, yeah. Why not? You're making a big profit. And this, I'm not making this up, this happens all the time. Many businessmen work very hard, travel in third class. In India, they still have, I think, third class on the trains. I think it's the one on top of the train where you hang on. I'm not sure. That could be fourth class. Yeah. People are willing to do that because it's important to them. So, B'Kabbalata Yisurin, you want to acquire Torah? You have to be prepared to suffer, to work hard. Why? Because you're convinced that this is something good for you. You know how many Talmidei Yeshiva students in the Yeshivot in the olden days slept on the Safsalim, on the benches. They were not interested in pinukim, in pampering themselves. First of all, they couldn't afford it, they didn't have the means, but they were willing, nonetheless, to spend time in the yeshiva. They realized the value of the few years they have. That's all, a few years. After that, you get married, you go on. This is it. I might as well make the best of it. And even though it involves sleeping on the bench, so what? I'm here to learn Torah, not to sleep. Kabbalata Yisurin is also a very healthy and important hashkafa, outlook towards life. Because what does Kabbalata Yisurin mean? I accept difficult times, I accept pain. If it comes and I can't remove it so easily, I deal with it. There's all kinds of pains we have in life. What are we supposed to think when pain comes our way, Hashem Yishmor? We're supposed to think, this is all min hashamayim, first of all. Nothing is by chance. And not only is it min hashamayim, it's leto'elet, it's to our benefit. How is it to our benefit? Well, imagine somebody you owed a lot of money to came and basically forced you to pay him back. Are you going to feel bad? Yes and no. You're going to feel bad because he forced you. You're going to feel good because Baruch Hashem, you don't owe anymore. The debt has been taken away from you. You don't have any debts. You're clean. When Hashem applies Yisurim, it's a kapara. Kaparat avonot, it's an atonement of sins. It's a cleansing agent. So that's the right way to look at Yisurim. We should never know of them, of course. We don't wish for them. But if they do arrive, they serve a purpose. It's all min hashamayim. So this Kabbalata Yisurin is also a proper hashkafa, a proper outlook on how we're supposed to look at pain and suffering in life. The readiness to accept Yisurin, however, is important because it brings one closer to Hashem. How does that happen? The fact that one has the readiness, in other words, he's he accepts it, understands it as best as possible, and does not complain, is because in the end he realizes it's coming from Hashem. So the readiness to accept it, to go along with it, will have the effect, the result will be that this will bring him closer to Hashem. As opposed to another individual called Bo'et B'Yisurim, which is the opposite of Mekabel Yisurim. Bo'et means to kick. He's upset, he complains, why me? I don't deserve this. There are people like that. What did I do wrong? On the contrary, I'm just doing teshuvah right now. Now, everything is turning bad on me. You have to be very careful from that. Bo'et B'Yisurim is a terrible thing. Person who's Bo'et, who kicks, who rebels, who refuses to accept Yisurim, then the Yisurim are not mechaper. It will not atone. Atonement is usually very, very effective when one accepts it bi'ahava, out of love, b'simcha, happy. So therefore, one who complains, what this will do, kabbalat the Yisurim, it will further him, distance him from Hashem. Whereas one who accepts it will bring him closer. This Kabbalat Yisurim is expressed in various pesukim. Shlomo Melech in Mishlei tells us, Shma beni musar avicha ve'al titosh torat imecha. You may recall those words. Listen, my son, to the rebuke of your father. Rebuke, as we will be learning next week, there's different kinds of rebuke. But one rebuke is Yisurim. Hashem is rebuking us, is admonishing us. It's not just plain criticism. So Shlomo Melech, of course, means both. Listen to the rebuke, the criticism, accept your father's direction and admonition. And also, your father, meaning HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shma beni, listen to that musar. Try to examine your deeds, perhaps, and figure out why this is coming, but don't complain. Accept it. Why should I accept it? So he continues on, because I have some good news to tell you. Ki tasher yohav Hashem yochiach. Who does Hashem give musar to? Who does he bring about pain? Only those who he loves and cares about. What that means is that you can have a rasha, a wicked man, a bal averot, a sinful individual, who's living a tranquil life. Nothing bad happened because Hashem does not like him. So he rewards him for whatever few good deeds he did in this world, but upstairs there's a reckoning and accounting to give. Those who Hashem loves, he will give musar. So if you have gone through a painful experience of some sort, like you broke your arm, right? Means Hashem loves you. How should one react? Or how should one deal with when difficult times come his way? The Chafetz Chaim once met someone who was very, very upset at life. He says, Rabbi, my life is bad. Everything is bad. He says, everything is bad, 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 bad. So the Chafetz Chaim says, never say the word bad. You're allowed to say it's bitter. Bitter, I agree with you. It's definitely bitter. But bad, it's not. It's good. That's the way Hashem wants it to be. Unless, of course, we are responsible for our own actions. We're in the area where we have free will. Other than that, if it comes from Shamayim, don't say bad. It's always good. It could be bitter. Bitter, fine. It's bitter. Right? But don't never say it's bad. So this attitude helps a lot with strengthening our emunah. The next Mishnah, the next portion, the next steps are Hamakiret Mekomo. One who recognizes his place. This is a little bit perplexing. What does it mean by Kiret Mekomo? He knows his place. I don't remember the exact wording of the expression, but there's something that goes like this. There are people who know how much they don't know. That's very good, because some people can be arrogant and think so highly that they know so much and accomplish so much. The proper way of looking at knowledge is, well, Baruch Hashem, of course, we've learned something, but how much do we still have to learn? Hamakir et mekomo is a form of humbleness, therefore, which says basically, yes, I've done so much, but I know how much more I need to do. That's called makir mekomo. How much more he needs to learn. Some actually interpret makir mekomo that he knows his true place. Where is one's true place? Not here, in Olam Haba. That could also be acceptable, because that follows Kabbalat Yisurin. The person is having a hard time in life and says, you know what, my real place is anywhere, not here, it's there. Okay. There's another story with the Chafetz Chaim where one was complaining about the weather. Rabbi, it's so foggy, it's so soggy, it's so terrible, it's so cold. He was always complaining about the weather. Every single day, something else about the weather. Hot, humid. The rabbi tells him, don't complain so much. Imagine, he says, he gave him the mashal, there was once an individual who stopped off for the night at a hotel. The next morning, as he's about to leave, he goes over to the manager, says, manager, I have some ideas on how you can remodel your place to make it look better. You know, move away the stove from the bed, broaden the windows, you know, so there should be more light, and change the linen, the carpets, the ashtray should be a different kind, all kinds of details that he's giving him advice. So the manager asks him, tell me, till when are you staying here? He says, no, I'm leaving now. He says, then it's none of your business how I run my place. Don't give me advice on what to do. You know, one day, what is it your business? Chafetz Chaim says, we're here for a day or two. You know, we're not here for that long. What are we going to complain about how things are? Before you know it, it's over. Time is short. So it doesn't pay for us to complain. Just accept it the way it is. So Hamakiret Mekomo is important. That second interpretation is important because there are stressful situations in life, and these stressful situations sometimes cause people to lose hope, or at the very least they take him away from learning Torah. It says, I don't have time for this. I got to pay bills. They seem to forget that this is your ticket to Olam Haba, to the world to come. You know, don't stop learning just because you're having a hard time. Don't blame that, the learning. This is your ticket to Olam Haba. This is your real makom is there, not here anyway. So I guess this interpretation is valid as well. But the simple interpretation still means that a person knows his place, he knows how much he's accomplished, how much more he needs to do. You could also say he knows his true value, he knows that he's now worthy of being called a chacham perhaps. He still needs to acquire more. All of these are acceptable interpretations. Next step is a sameach bechelko. You know, that perhaps sounds familiar to many of you. Sameach bechelko means one who's content. Where do we know this from? Because we learned once upon a time, Ezu Ashir, Sameach bechelko. Who is considered a rich man? One who's content with his lot, with whatever he has. He's a true rich man. Not one who has millions of dollars and he's worried about, you know, his money being taken away from him. He has sleepless nights. All that money doesn't bring him happiness and quiet. So, Sameach b'chelko is a beautiful midah. Just be happy with what you have. This is what Hashem wants me to have. Why is this mentioned over here as a level or a step in acquiring the Torah? Sameach b'chelko is a midah that if one is truly content, it brings about peace of mind. Peace of mind is something that so many people want and they don't have. Peace of mind, that's all. Nothing else. They ask for peace of mind. Sameach b'chelko brings peace of mind. Very simple. And what will happen if a person has peace of mind? He will be able to focus on his learning better. He will be able to concentrate. So that is why it is mentioned over here, because in order to acquire a good understanding in learning, in order to be able to grow in learning in Torah, one really has to have as much as possible peace of mind, so he can concentrate on his learning. Some explain that this samech bechelko is not necessarily talking about contentment in life in general. It's talking about his share in the Torah. Baruch Hashem, he says, I've accomplished this much. This year I've learned an entire book. Didn't learn too much more. One book, great. He realizes that slowly does it. There are people whose attitude is, I'm going to cover a lot of ground, I'm going to accomplish a lot, and then they don't really cover anything. So Samech Bechelko could also be interpreted, therefore, as saying he values the little bit, even though it's little, of what he's accomplished, and he therefore is able to progress further. Next step, how it says Siag Lidvarav. This may also sound familiar. Siag is a fence, one who erects a fence to his words. Well, we learned Siag la Chochma Shtika. A good fence to preserve the Chochmah is for one to keep his mouth shut, to learn silence, to not be too talkative. Talking too much will get people into trouble. So, the Rabbi's advice, Siag la Chochma Shtika, a good fence to preserve one's Chochmah, is to learn when to keep our mouth shut. Obviously, there's a time to speak, there's a time to be quiet, but in general, it's not such a good idea to just have a loose mouth. That's what those words mean. So here, we're talking about one who's striving to become a Talmid Chacham, to acquire Torah. He's telling us that that condition that we learned about applies here too. How does it apply here? Well, first of all, if you're a teacher, you have to know what to say and what not to say. Certain things you can't just say. They may not be, especially for young children. How are you going to explain some very complex topics? Famous topic of Lot with his daughters in the cave, if you know what I'm talking about. How are you going to explain that to little children if you're teaching them? Some people will skip it. Some people will have, try to figure it out. There are things you have to keep to yourself. That we know. So that's when you're teaching. Some say Siag Lidvarav does not mean your words or your speech necessarily. It means your life. Make fences. Discipline yourself. You know your limits. You know what you can handle. Don't overdo it. Don't overexert yourself. Don't try to get things that are totally useless and non-essential for life. All of that will dissipate your energy, will get you too involved in so many distractions of life that it will take away from the Torah. So that can also be accepted as an interpretation as Siag Lidvarav, meaning a fence around one's life, around one's occupation. That he basically is contented with what he has and doesn't search for too much more. I wanted to, however, add my own interpretation here. Siag Lidvarav, since we're dealing with someone who wants to really achieve a lot in Torah, the highest levels of Torah, a siag for diburim means that in order to acquire Torah, you have to adapt the tool of being a good listener. Even though in Torah learning there is communication, there is exchange of ideas, perhaps one meaning, an additional meaning could be here, you want to really retain what you've learned, you really want to acquire it. Don't just listen to yourself. Don't just talk. Listen to what others have to say. Listen to the teacher. Absorb as much as you can from him, and don't talk so much. Limit your talking so that you can be a better listener. So being a good listener is not only a good thing in life in general, it's very important in being able to absorb as much Torah with clarity. Clarity because there are people who interrupt the teacher so much, but they're not going to gain any clarity. You listen, perhaps it will sink in a lot better. Next condition, next step, אינו מחזיק טובה לעצמו. This is also similar to something we've learned in the past. אם למדת תורה הרבה, אל תחזיק טובה לעצמך, כי לכך נוצרת. We've learned that if you've, Baruch Hashem, accomplished a lot in Torah, don't feel so proud about yourself, because you were created for that. In other words, what did you? That's your duty. So here, he's bringing in that condition as an important step in acquiring Torah, is that you don't feel so proud of yourself. On the contrary, you say, this is my duty. I have so much more to accomplish. A person who thinks highly of himself, he's so proud of this achievement, in the end what that will do, it will ruin the L'Shem Shamayim aspect of his learning. It's no longer for the sake of heaven. He's obviously happy. Maybe he wants to be honored or something. He wants an award. So it ruins the chances of the Torah being ever L'Shem Shamayim. And number two, it also may cool off his excitement to continue to learn more and more. He says, oh, look at all this. So as we've said earlier too, one has to always remember, even though he may have accomplished a lot, there's so much more to learn, that what he has done so far is just a drop in the bucket. That's fine. Be happy, of course, that you've done what you've done, but remember at the same time, don't be overly excited, because there's so much more to cover. So, eno machzik tova le'atzmo. He doesn't take the credit for having done so much. Also, perhaps you can say it's a form of humbleness. Some say, I think, that this is tova le'atzmo, meaning he shares it with others, he just doesn't hold it for himself. Okay, you can say that too. But the basic meaning is, don't take credit for it. In order to understand the danger of this, all we need to do is to turn to a portion of the Torah where the Torah warns wealthy people. Wealthy people, listen, you are blessed, but there's the danger of v'ram levavecha v'shachachta. You may become arrogant as a result of all the money, and you will forget who the source of all this blessing is, who gave this to you. You will forget Hashem, you will forget His mitzvot. So we see how the Torah warns the wealthy, the rich, to remember who gave them all that money. Where does the money come from? It's not your PhD. It's not even your plain mazal. In the end, it's all mishamayim. In the end, Hashem is the one that gives you the mazal. So in the end, that's the source. But wealthy people forget that. It's just that it's a very powerful yetzer hara, evil inclination, when a person has tons of money. You know, somebody just won over $300 million, I think, in the lottery. What are they going to do with it? Somebody appreciates properly where the money comes from. He says, Hashem, thank you so much. I'm going to do what you expect of me to do with all that money that you entrusted in me, is to help those who are not so blessed. Obviously, everybody has a different cheshbon of what he could do with the money, but don't think it's automatic that he's going to think positively. You know, a lot of people's lives has been ruined as a result of all the sudden money that has come their way. But if you have the right attitude, this is all a blessing, mishamayim. You deal with it differently. The next midah is ahuv. Ahuv means he's beloved. Beloved. Here we're dealing with a midah, a characteristic that has already been achieved, as opposed to a step. This is something much more already achieved. One who's completely permeated with Torah, Torah Lishma especially, you will see it. It will be noticeable how he's ahuv. People admire him. People look up to him. He's beloved. He's well-liked. He's respected. That's an excellent sign that he's real, that the Torah, therefore, in him is real. They don't like him because of his money. No, that's external. They like him for what he is. So one of the ultimate results, positive results, of course, of somebody who goes in this path and elevates himself step by step to acquire the Torah is that he will become ahuv. He will become beloved. As opposed to who? As opposed to movie stars. Aren't they beloved and admired too? But what's the difference? By them it's all fake. The makeup is fake. Their behavior is fake. The programs pay lots of money to lift these people up. Corporations invest lots of money in advertisements that could be misleading to sell a product. They want to raise their product in people's eyes. They want to give it much more importance than it really deserves. You know, there's a lot of fads these days of all kinds of miracle foods. Oh, take this berry from the Amazon jungle every day, and you will feel younger, and you will lose weight. Oh wow, every American likes that. Lose weight? Especially if you're always having junk food every day. And here you're promising an easy fix, and there are no easy fixes, we know that. And all of a sudden the movie star gets up. Who do they put to sell the product? A movie star. Oh, because you respect the movies. He's telling you this. It must be true. What does it turn out to be? It's not a lie. No. You can get yourself in trouble for lying. But I don't know if they would call this a white lie or what. It's not accurate. Because you can get the same health benefits, forget about the actual promises of losing weight, you can get the same health benefits from other foods as well. So why spend $55 on a bottle of concentrated berry from the Amazon? I'm saying berry because there's all kinds of berries. Why spend that much money? Because somebody wants to make money on you. That's all it is. Perhaps they believe in it too, but it's not 100% accurate. In order to convince, what do? Therefore, they spend tons of money in advertisement to convince you. One who has Torah Lishma, one who's permeated with Torah, does not have to convince. He's not artificial. It can be seen. He's looked up to, he's well liked. That's the difference. Ohevet hamakom, this is something very special. Somebody who has grown a lot in Torah, he loves Hashem. I would expect so. No. Don't think that's something that just comes naturally and automatic to anybody. To love Hashem is not so easy because you don't see Him. How do you love somebody you don't see? When you see someone, then perhaps there's a connection to be made. You see His kindness towards you, but how do you love Hashem? Ohevet hamakom, when one learns Torah, it comes to see, wow, what a God. Look at all the love and kindness emanating from this God in the creation of the universe. Look at the design, look at the attention and care that He has given everything from the smallest creature and blade of grass to the greatest galaxies. If we think about it, it brings love, it brings admiration, it brings fear too. So look at what happens to someone who actually learns Torah. At some point, he will see from the Torah the greatness of Hashem, and he will come to love Hashem. This Ahavat Hashem is also therefore indicative that the Torah is pure. Otherwise, he wouldn't come to such a conclusion. And I repeat it time after time that I promise you, anyone who learns the entire Shas, Midrashim, Zohar, and does so with the proper attitude, he will be so impressed by the time he's finished, as long as he understood what he read. And he said, wow, what a valuable treasure, what an asset we have. How great are the works of the rabbis, and of course how great Hashem is. It infuses us with Yirat Shamayim, with the fear of heaven. So one who elevates himself step by step comes to the point of Ohevet hamakom, And then, at that point, he wants to emulate his Creator. Just like he is compassionate, then we should be compassionate. We want to be like God, in the sense of in his midot. And, according to the Kabbalah, a person who loves Hashem, they reveal to him secrets of the Torah. So he gets a lot more than just knowledge of the Torah, secrets. Ohev et habriot, very, very important idea too. At some point, not only does he love Hashem, he loves all humanity. He doesn't discriminate. He has no prejudice. That is a true indicator of an individual who learned Torah, and Torah Lishma probably. He loves everyone. Why? Simple. And this is a rule that I wish every religion in the world would understand. It's so logical. If you really love God, you love all his creatures. To love God and to hate some of his creatures is a contradiction. Jihad, that's a contradiction. God made these people, these human beings. To hate them means that you can't love Hashem properly. You love God, then you love what he made. It's a very deep concept, deep idea. People don't think too much about it. A person who hates certain people means he doesn't really have love for God. One, of course, who elevates himself to this level is able to appreciate all of humanity.
You can hate the behavior.
You can hate the behavior, that's very true. The behavior you can hate, but not the human being himself. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And the last 2 points that we'll cover today, Ohev et tzedakot and Ohev et mesharim. I'm going to skip Ohev et tochachot, some put tochachot in between. Ohev et tzedakot, he loves the charity, the pursuit of charity. A charitable person does not only wait for the person to come to him, he searches the individual, he searches for opportunities to be charitable. What does this have to do with anything? Well, it's very, very likely that one who learns Torah, especially Torah Lishma, will become very sensitive to people and to people's needs. He does not only tolerate them, he does not only accept them, he's sensitive to their needs. He feels bad if they're in pain. He's therefore Ohev et tzedakot. You see somebody who does not like the tzedakot, something is not right, not 100% by him. Of course, we all have our nature, and nature is to blame, but Torah changes that nature. It refines it, it directs it. And the direction or the ultimate result of real Torah, of pure Torah, is Ohev et tzedakot. He will want to be charitable. And Ohev et mesharim. He likes straightness. Mesharim means things that are straight. There's a lot of things in life that are crooked. A lot of people who are crooked, twisted. Things that are not honest, things that are not straight. Flattery is an example too. People flatter you, and they're really hypocritical. They don't really like you. Why they're flattering you? Because they're false. In other words, they're not truthful. So, but they want to give the appearance that they like you for whatever reason. That's not straight. That's crooked. That's untruthful. One who learns Torah cannot tolerate that which is untruthful. Ohev et mesharim does not only mean he behaves like this and he likes this and he appreciates this, it also means that he cannot tolerate the opposite. He cannot tolerate sheker, he cannot tolerate chanufa, flattery. On the contrary, all he tries to do is to correct things, to straighten things, to help people. You will find the two in your life. You will find people who may, by the way, not be so learned, but they're still honest and straight. It's not necessarily conditioned that you have to be learned in Torah in order to be straight. There are people that, Baruch Hashem, have a good, solid education. Their nature is solid. They're firm. They're consistent. They're honest. They have very good virtues, good qualities. And there are those who learn Torah and are rotten. Nothing, it's not necessarily related to that. The Mishnah is telling us that real pure Torah, look what it elevates the person to. All the greatest tzaddikim and chachamim had all these. We should reach their, to the bottom of their feet, their ankle. We're far from them, but this at least gives us a map, a plan on what we can strive for and what we can attain. Ohevet HaMesharim is very, very important, simply because this life is so full of temptations for people to do the wrong thing, to do the crooked thing, the twisted thing, the untruthful thing. Without Torah, how is he going to resist? He's only going to resist if the FBI is on his back, or he's going to be caught. He's afraid. That shouldn't be the reason to resist. The Torah tells us this is not the way to conduct yourself. But money has become an idol. I shouldn't say has always been an idol. Money, the biggest Yetzer Hara. And people do crooked things, twisted things, flattery and the like, because obviously they don't appreciate, they don't love Mesharim. So Ohevet HaMesharim, how do you come to that? By learning. Learning Torah Lishma will elevate a person to the point that he won't think otherwise. This is totally unacceptable if he sees something that's smelly, that's rotten, that's corrupt. He says, no way will I have put my hand into this. He won't even have to think twice about it. If it's sheker, if it's twisted, if it's wrong, if it's illegal, he won't even blink an eye, as they say in English. Somebody who doesn't have it says, oh really? Where do I sign? If something is tempting, yeah. So what? Look at the callousness and the carelessness and the indifference of certain people who are supposed to be religious, but nonetheless, when they're tempted, they all of a sudden look away. Nobody's looking, it's okay. He's rich anyway. He won't feel it. All kinds of excuses to justify stealing. Oh, it's the government anyway. It's okay. Chaz v'shalom. You can't say that, because you can't pick and choose. Or from them, I can steal, from him not. This is okay. This is not. If it's wrong, it's wrong. But to know the difference between right and wrong is sometimes tricky. So the Mishnah tells us, well, it's not tricky for one who learns Torah. It becomes natural to him. Ohev et HaMesharim. He will like it. It will be normal for him. He won't think twice about hurting someone. On the contrary, he will only be helpful because he likes everything straight and not crooked. I think this is one of, I shouldn't say this one more than anything else, but this is a very, very important quality that comes about as a result of learning Torah properly. Okay, that Hashem will continue next week.